Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to contribute to this incredibly important session. As mentioned, I am with the Tax Justice Network Africa, which is a member of the civil society FfD mechanism. Chair, as mentioned by Her Excellency Ms. Bjorg Sandkjær, the State Secretary, Deputy Minister for Development of Norway, domestic resource mobilization has indeed been identified as the most sustainable source of financing. Recent experience and even conversations in this room this week have indicated that while important elements, we can no longer depend on private financing, debt, and/or ODA in order to fund national development plans. However, conversations about enhancing domestic resource mobilization have almost always been one-sided. Countries, specifically Global South countries, are constantly being saddled with responsibilities and conversations about DRM centering around capacity building in order to help them achieve their domestic resource mobilization objectives. And so this includes, for example, improving their beneficial ownership transparency, strengthening their tax systems, strengthening their revenue authorities. And while all of this is indeed important, as was mentioned by Ms. Catherine Bear from the IMF, even if Global South countries were able to address all of these issues, Chair, they wouldn't be enough. While traditionally tax policy was recognized as an issue of national sovereignty, following the explosion of world trade and globalization, states increasingly recognized that there was a need to develop international solutions to address the issues of base erosion and profit shifting. And this was something that was reiterated earlier by His Excellency Mr. Francis Zingue from Gabon. The novelty of this session, Chair, is that it helps to unpack and address some of the systemic issues that are confronting the international tax system today. Issues that are in essence preventing particularly developing countries from achieving and attaining their fiscal space, the space that they need to attain their domestic resource mobilization goals and pursue their much needed structural transformation. To draw from an analogy from one of my colleagues, only addressing national level constraints to domestic resource mobilization is akin to constantly pouring water in a sieve. Chair, we have loopholes in our international financial architecture, and as is reflected in the title of the resolution we are discussing today, we have a system that is ineffective and, to use the words of many in the room over the past few days have indicated, not fit for purpose. Unlike other cross-border issues such as corruption, climate change, and migration, international taxation is decentralized and determined by the application of tax laws of the relevant jurisdictions. It does not have a coordinating tax authority which has oversight over cross-border transactions. Dating back to when Global South countries were first able to contribute to conversations regarding the international tax regime, Global South countries have consistently called for two things. Firstly, the fair allocation of taxation rights, because at the time developing countries had no voice in global conversations. And secondly, a multilateral tax body to address issues pertaining to tax avoidance and tax evasion. This was in the form of the Mexico draft in 1943, which was presented following a regional conference of Global South countries. In response to this, however, developed countries refused to support it and subsequently derailed these efforts. It was this response that saw at that time the abolishment of the United Nations Fiscal Commission. And I say this to indicate the point that developing countries have always led the call for the United Nations to have a central role in the cross-border issue of taxation. What we need, Chair, is a binding multilateral solution. And as was mentioned by His Excellency Ibrahim Mayaki, a United Nations tax convention and a UN tax body to democratize the way in which we develop tax rules. We need a platform where countries are able to engage on a level playing field, where concerns of all countries are reflected in the outcomes, and where economic issues are discussed alongside other key areas of importance in order to ultimately address one of the most important constraints to promoting domestic resource mobilization today. Thank you, Chair.